Sid Rosenberg is on 640 Sports.
Only one man knows if Mike Redmond actually is in trouble, and that man, of course, is Marlins owner Jeffrey Loria. This whole situation now becomes a test of how much Loria trusts his new top executives. Mike Hill and Dan Jennings, they took over at the end of 13. And if you recall, during the offseason, Loria expressed how much more comfortable he was with them than with his previous front office. Let's face it, 13 games is less than 1/10 the season. The Marlins haven't pitched well. They are last in bullpen ERA, second to last in rotation ERA in the National League. It's really too soon to pull the plug on one of the most respected managers in the industry, but Jeffrey Loria has been known to do things like this before.
I'll be kind if you be faithful, you be sweet and I'll be grateful. Cover me with kisses, dear, lighten up the atmosphere. Keep me warm inside our bed, I got dreams of you all through my head. Fortune teller said I'd be free, and that's the day you came to me. Came to me. Come to me, my sweetest friend. Can you feel my heart again? I'll take you back where you belong, and this'll be your favorite song. Come to me with secrets bare. I love you more, so don't be scared. And when we're old and near the end, we'll go home and start again.
Who the hell was that? Who was that just now?
Ken Rosenthal.
Ken Rosenthal, I mean, this is, he's at the very top of the food chain. Did he just describe Mike Redmond, who's been around for about 15 minutes, as one of the most respected managers in the game?
He did.
Is he high?
I don't believe so.
I like Mike, and, you know, I think even talking about firing Mike is ridiculous, although that's Jeffrey Loria. He has the right to do that, but Mike Redmond is still considered a young and up-and-comer. He's not even close to being one of the most respect. Terry Collins deserves more respect than Mike Redmond. Oh, God. With that said, though, I think firing Mike is not... But that doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter. Jeffrey Loria owns a team, and if he wants to get rid of the guy, then get rid of him. Lengel's a big Marlin fan. He wants him out.
Before he ruins the season.
He's going to ruin his season. Yeah, you've only played 13, so now it'll be 50 games and be in the same spot. Then what? You want Wally Backman now, don't you?
Yes.
You're going to tweet Wally Backman now for Marlin fans.
Yeah.
Because Wally Backman's going to make Stanton get a big hit in a big spot. And Wally Backman's going to make sure that Matt Latos and Tom Kohler don't give up 7 runs in one inning, right? Wally Backman's going to do all that.
Oh, well, Stanton said they're not inspired. They're not motivated.
He did say that. You would think $320 million would inspire him.
Well, he needs a little more.
Yeah.
He needs a coach to coddle him.
I'm inspired by Joe Frisaro. He's not a good baseball guy. He's a great baseball guy. He covers the Marlins on a daily basis for MLB.com, and we love him. So here's Joe. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Sydney, how you doing, buddy?
Are you inspired by Mike Redmond?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, not by the start.
No.
But firing him isn't going to do anything, and except for just kind of make a mess even worse.
Well, here's what it screams of, Joe. Listen, you've been around this game and sports a long time, and you really are. You're a very savvy guy. This is what it screams of. You're a superstar, and I can take you back to Magic Johnson. That's how Pat Riley got the job. He hated Paul Westhead. Your superstar doesn't like the coach or the manager. Manager goes. Doesn't matter if you're 3-10.
Oh, no question.
That's it. So
yeah, but I don't think that's the case here. I don't think Stanton's comments were directed at Redmond specifically or the coaching staff. I think it was kind of a collective, we're all kind of in this. And that's why they had the meeting the next day to try to air it out. But they got to pitch. They need a pitch. They don't need a new manager. And, I think if they made him – let's put it this way. If they did something and Stanton wasn't on board with it, it's going to be a big, big disaster. And I certainly don't think that Stanton's pointing his finger directly at the manager or the coaching staff.
Why then do so many people do think that? Is it really as simple as, hey, we're 3-10, so he's talking to Redmond?
Well, if you notice where they were in that night, it was just kind of a really lackluster night, and things were snowballing in the wrong way. And Stanton, this is what you're kind of caught in. This is a guy who is quiet by nature. He tries to just kind of do his thing. But, this is his team. And the contract, the long-term stability with him. And he saw stuff he didn't like. So he chose to speak that night, and we applaud for that. The front office applauded them for that, and they were looking like they were going through the motions. There was a specific play where the kid on the Mets stole second base on the full count, and Real Muto makes a great throw. They're going to get him out at second, and Echeverria just catches the ball thinking the guy walked, doesn't
Right.
apply a tag.
Right.
and you see the replay of Real Muto, go and tag him. That type of stuff all reflects bad on everyone wearing a uniform, manager and players alike. And so he spoke up after that game. So is what he said. He said what we all saw.
So here's my question.
He's taking a leadership role,
Right.
and it's being twisted as he's demanding the manager.
So
And,
here's my question.
That's our
then.
fault.
It seems with you at least, cooler heads have prevailed. You're being very rational here. You're talking about the superstar player who's frustrated by the lousy start and is just making a comment. Nothing real negative towards anybody in particular. I get
And
it.
he's not excluding himself either. So it's not like I hit a homer in a couple of games.
Well,
I'm
he
great.
shouldn't. He shouldn't because he struck out
Correct.
3 times on Saturday and had a chance to tie the game on
Correct.
Sunday. So with all that said, then, do you think that Loria is listening to what you're saying, or do you think that he is caught up, the owner, in this frenzy, and there really is a chance that Mike Redmond could be fired as early as this week?
That would be really, really fast. But Sid, there's a lot of things in play here. For one, because every day in New York up until Sunday, everyone was like, "There's no panic here. We're not going to panic." Blah blah blah. And that's the top people in the organization. Everyone's kind of there. Then Clark's story came out, and some people told me that's completely not true, and then others are like, "Where there's smoke, there's fire." And I will say this, and this is a team with expectation, and that is a change for not only the players, but for the manager as well. I mean, it's one thing to be last year coming off a 100-loss season, everyone's saying they're going to suck, and then you surprise people, and you kind of come. Now you got a target. You've signed the players that you said you were going to sign. You have playoff expectations. You're a really good team, and you're not winning.
Right.
So there's an adjustment there for the manager as well. So. Could this happen? Oh, absolutely, it could happen.
I mean, if they get swept,
that naive. But I think there's a real danger, though, to overreact. Like you say, 13 games or 15 games, whatever it might be, could be completely disastrous for them moving forward.
Or not, because he's got a history of doing this. When he fired Jeff Torborg early in the season, McKean came in, they won a World Series. He got rid of Freddie, he got rid of Girardi, he got rid of Rodriguez during the season. He's got a history of doing this. I would say this, and I doubt this will happen. I really do doubt it, because I still think the Marlins are a good baseball team. But if they get swept here by the Phillies, and it's not going
to look good. Yeah,
he could be gone by Friday. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it could be really, really disastrous. That Yeah, I mean, this is clearly a lot of pressure in the series, which the fact that it's out there now increases it too, because everyone's going to say he's got to go, and that's Wally Backman or whoever comes in, it's going to be a really hard sell. Then you're going to have guys all playing for themselves. They're going to have guys that are having their own agendas. What this team needs, Sid, is to clear out about 3 players in the clubhouse and get some starting pitching.
I totally agree. But, it's when these things happen, it's part of the hysteria, part of the fun, part of the soap opera.
Correct.
When you've got a veteran manager, Joe, that's been around for a long time, you start to get these guys are playing for his job, right? If Torrey's in trouble, then Jeter and these guys are playing for Torrey. You don't have that here because everybody here is new. The infield is brand new. The outfield are a bunch of 19-year-old kids. So there's not going to be that we're playing for Mike Redmond because there's not enough guys that have been here long enough.
No, and what else I see, Sid, is a team searching for its identity. They moved a lot of like last year. McGee's impact in the clubhouse can't be understated. He's a tough guy, and early on, remember, he got the big hit. So not only was he the right message and the right guy in the clubhouse, and he had everyone's back, he was also driving in the big runs. So right now, their players certainly capable of doing that. They just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, the only guy that's really played well is D. Gordon.
You gotta, Morris could be a real leader, but Morris is new and he's deferring as well. So you need, you're straight. You're starting to see right now they're straightening out the catcher situation. When last time we talked about how valuable Salty could be, but if he's not getting it done and he's not putting the ball, putting the bat in the ball, we're already seeing JT playing, and the kid's pretty good. So you're already seeing some promise in the lineup. it's just the starting rotation is just these guys are better than that. They're not that bad. They're not the best right now in terms of their pure talent, but it's not a 5 ERA staff, which is what they're playing at.
Well,
right
it's funny,
now.
though, because you may remember when you came on last week, I played a clip for you from Christopher Mad Dog Russo. He made it a point to point out to me that he thought the Marlins were clearly the third-place team. I actually thought the Marlins were going to come in second. They still may. And he said, listen, Sid,
I think they may, too.
Yeah, he goes, I don't trust Latos, and he's been awful. I don't trust, don't give me Henderson Alvarez, and unfortunately Henderson's hurt already. Jose is still hurt. Kohler had an awful effort. So when you look at the stamp right now, and Latos and Kohler each gave up 7 in one inning, maybe Doggy was onto something. Maybe these guys weren't as good as advertised.
Well, the Henderson Alvarez comments is ridiculous. He doesn't see enough of him. The guy is a really, really, really good pitcher, and his presence is missed. But obviously, Latos is one of those guys with a track record that they hope performs. He did throw a little better in New York, gave up the 2 runs because of, I think it was he had the Grom, right?
Yes.
So he comes out for pinch hitter, and it turns out the bullpen gives up more runs, and then they chip back and make it a 1-run game late. He's a guy right now that has to pitch better. There's no question. Kohler is going to have his ups and downs, and that was, baffling because he was perfect through 3. And then he gives up a base runner, and next thing you know, he can't get anyone out, and they got 7 runs, which is really fluky in its own right, too. But, I still go player by player, Marlins, Mets, and outside of, Harvey, DeGrom, I don't give a lot of edges to New York.
Yeah, but that's all you need, though.
But
but
this is all about process and going on, and so the Marlins right now they got to figure it out. They got to get through 5, 6, 7 innings with their starters, and their offense is plenty good enough, even with the struggles they've had.
Well, first of all, that's all you need is Harvey DeGrom. If you're that strong 1-2 and that much better than the Marlins with Fernandez and Henderson on the shelf, that's all you need. And 1-2 is actually not being fair because, believe it or not, he won 15 last year. He's been perfect this year, and he's
I know.
Bartolo Colon has been amazing.
Hey, look,
yes.
Yeah, New York is all a buzz, and that's great. You might have the parade at the end of April, but I've seen way too much. You're not going to pitch to a sub-1 ERA, and you're not going to hit 380 with Lucas Duda, and you're not going to hit, Eric Campbell's not going to be David Wright, and you're
but hold on, but to that point, then we're all yelling and screaming about how maybe outside the Pirates, the Marlins have the best outfield in baseball. It's not like Yelich and Ozuna have a long track record of success either.
Correct. Yeah, they haven't gotten it done yet, but those guys don't indicate they're all going to hit 200.
I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
If they have 3 guys, those 3 guys all hitting 200 to 210, then yes.
But you know what? Forget about 200 to 210. If they're not hitting 25 homers, not going to hit 90 runs, if they go 17, 63, 260, it ain't going to be a good year. That's the bottom line.
Correct.
D. Gordon is the only guy right now that's showing up every single. Now, look, I do think they're good players, and like I said, I picked the Marlins to come in second, and I'm not getting off of that. But it's dangerous with the Marlins because you're counting on a lot of young guys who have not really had a track record of success, new guys coming in, and now a beat-up pitching staff at the top of that rotation, and a bunch of veterans that have been more bad than good the last couple of years. So we may want to slow down a bit. To kill Mike Redmond, we may have just placed way too high expectations on this team.
Yes and no, and I think a lot of people were saying this team was geared more to be better in 16 than 15. But that said, I think this team's plenty good to win in 15. If the starters, do their part, and they may have to make a trade. May have to go and get an arm, and it may be all they need. But I'm banking on that outfield not completely underperforming, and looking at lineups 1 through 8. I kind of like what I'm seeing, and I think in another, I don't know how much longer because there's 162 total, but I think you're going to see a standings correction come in the not too distant.
Well, it better be. It better be. Or there'll be some changes here. When is Jose looking to get back? June?
Earliest would be June. It could be closer to the All-Star break.
Okay. And what about Alvarez? Where's he at?
Well, he's supposed to play catch sometime this week, so that's very encouraging. And if they could get him back within 2 or 3 weeks, that's real encouraging as well.
Last one then, Joe. It's a young team, and you know this, Joe. You go from all this expectations, all this excitement, and when it starts getting ugly early, it can snowball. These kids are not
no question.
Right, so do you feel like it's a tight clubhouse right now?
I feel like Mike Redmond's strength has always been to buffer upstairs from the clubhouse and to be the ability to turn the page. I think there's some negativity that's creeping in, and that is dangerous. So, it's definitely how they, navigate through these waters very soon is going to be really, really telling in how this season could pan out.
Fair to say the only way to navigate and the only way to get rid of that negativity at this point wins. That's it?
Correct. Starting pitching and wins. Yeah. Let's put this. Obviously, they have their problems are easily curable by some wins.
Okay, fair enough. This is I'm actually upset it started this way because I was excited about the Marlins it does make for at least some interesting conversation. And this Marlins Phillies series all of a sudden becomes a very big one early on. And as always, Joe, thank you for your great work, and we love you. Thank you.
Did you have a birthday not long ago?
I did on Sunday. I turned 48.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. You're great. Joe Pissarro. And again, if you're a Marlins fan, if you're a baseball fan, he's one of my favorite baseball guys. He's been around a long, long time, and he knows his stuff. So read all of his Marlins stuff on MLB.com. Marlins and Phillies, and they start a big series tonight. And it sounded to me like he was poo-pooing Mike Redmond being in jeopardy. He made it pretty clear. He thinks it's silly that that's the case, that the team is not pitching and not playing well. But he said there's a bunch of negativity inside the clubhouse, and he did make it sound like the Clark Spencer story is not untrue. Right? I mean, right or wrong? What'd you get out of that?
There's some kind of tension in but his personal opinion is that it'll just make a bigger mess of things by firing the manager.
But his opinion doesn't matter. It's Lauria's opinion.
Right.
So the only thing we need to get from him is this in fact a story? Do you really believe that Lauria is considering firing the manager? And he seemed to go that route, I thought. 888-640-9385. Back on a busy Tuesday right after this.
640's own Sid Rosenberg show is on the air.
640 Sports.
The narrative was set, back in October. And I think the narrative, that about injuries, which were real, and they are every year with every team. But I do believe the narrative of the constant talking, writing, reading, disseminating information, social media grabs onto somebody with a hangnail and then it's 2 weeks that they're going to miss or something is totally out of hand. And that has to be stopped, so I would always take the narrative of, I'm just picking out a name. If somebody would ask Kobe Bryant or any other player of his ilk about whatever happened to him, he would probably tell them to go F themselves. I'm fine. I'll watch Larry Bird lay on his back in playoff games, and I know how injured he was. And when he was asked a question about it, he would say the same thing. I'm fine. And that's just not the way it is today. I think throughout the league, this is a league-wide problem. We get to the point where every night where you don't even know who you're going to play, even on a good, healthy team, because they're always saying, well, this guy is questionable or this guy is whatever. And so I'd like to try and, change the narrative, for our team and, get back to the reality of what being a professional athlete is all about. That's what it's about. We're going to need him. And I think also with Dwayne is he's got to change the narrative himself about his body and about his injuries and about his missing games. And we've had a discussion about this, but he always, has to answer those questions. And I know those questions are legitimate because they're real, and so night in and night out, there's always the question of whether or not he can or he can't. And so I'd like to have him try to get past that first hurdle, mentally, and do whatever he has to do to get himself ready to practice and himself ready to play.
I don't like this word. I'm about to utter it. I don't like it, but did Pat Riley pretty much call Dwayne Wade a bitch? I mean, that's what I took from that. It's, hey, sick and tired of hearing about how you're hurt all the time and you limping all over the place. And, hey, Dwayne, get out there and play, man. I mean, now look, Dwayne played, unfortunately, for the Heat down the stretch and had a 4 for 20 one night against, who was that, Indiana? I don't know. He had a couple of really bad. He went 4 for 20 one game and 8 for 22 the next. So he actually did play. He just hurt his team down the stretch. But Riley openly calling out Dwayne Wade. And I know Cooper's team will say no. But if you think it's anything but, you're naive. You're somewhere between naive and stupid and probably closer to the latter. So that was a frustrated, pissed-off Riley. He was pissed off last year after the Heat got embarrassed by San Antonio, but at least they made it to the NBA Finals. He had no idea LeBron was leaving, and now he's really pissed. Like, he's sick of Wade's injuries, and he took a shot at LeBron, too. He said last year at this time of getting ready for the NBA draft, and they drafted Shabazz Napier, who's a really good player out of Connecticut. The guy won 2 championships. But they drafted him because LeBron liked him. So LeBron's like, I want that guy here. He's the best player in college basketball. So Riley, to appease LeBron, got a good player, but to appease LeBron, brought in Shabazz, and LeBron's gone, and Shabazz was a disaster. So he took a shot at LeBron, too, and people who put smiley faces on the cell phone. What are those called? Emojins? Or
Emojis.
Yeah.
It's funny
he was
how
mad, and he took a shot at Spoelstra. He said, my head coach ought to be beating himself up about now, and if he's not, I'm going to help him. So there was Pat Riley. He could have gotten up there and said, listen, folks, we had some injuries, and it was unfortunate that Chris Bosh couldn't go, and that was not, which was great. He used that word narrative about 50 times, and what makes Riley so great is he's accountable, except when he leaves the Knicks, of course, and faxes that in. But for the most part, he's accountable. And his narrative yesterday was, I'm tired of the excuses. I'm tired of the injury excuse. It's enough. They asked him if Dragic will be back. He said, Ira, I'll be sitting where you're sitting right now if he's not. So don't worry about that. I'll get that done, basically. But he did not use injuries or any of that stuff. He openly, in my estimation, my opinion, he called out Dwayne Wade. He called out Eric Spoelstra. He took a shot at LeBron James. He was taking shots at everybody, except for Whiteside. He likes us on Whiteside.
It's funny how he says Kobe and, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing.
Larry Bird.
Yeah, but he says Kobe or anyone of his stature.
His ilk.
His ilk.
Right. Great player.
He doesn't even put Wade on the same, which they're probably...
No, he did. He wasn't saying Wade is not on that level. He's saying when you talk about a guy of that ilk, in other words, I'm not bringing up a guy who's just a role player. I'm talking about one of the greatest players in the game who treats it that way. It had nothing to do with Dwayne Wade.
Yeah, but when the media asks... Kobe says F off. When the media asks Wade's like, I'm hurting my elbow.
Dwayne Wade is a great player. Dwayne Wade is an all-time great player. If you want to put Kobe Bryant as the second-best two-guard ever behind Michael Jordan, about 1 or 2 behind him is Dwayne Wade. So, no, there's no... No one's. If you're going to argue what a player, you're an idiot. I mean,
no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
what he said was he's not talking about a guy who was just an okay player in Kobe Bryant. He's talking about one of the all-time greats who wouldn't talk about it. Dwayne Wade is also an all-time great, but he does talk about it. So he was talking about, and he wasn't comparing their game, their skill level. They're both phenomenal. What he was saying was, I got one guy who's an all-time great who won't talk about it. I've got another who's an all-time great. That's all he talks about.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
If you want to be one of those guys, carry yourself like them.
Right.
So
but he's there. Dwayne Wade is there.
No, I agree. He's definitely there. But it's a phrase. Kobe and others, they don't complain. But when you throw a mic in front of Wade's face, he's like, well, my back hurts.
That's his issue. But that has nothing to do with what his game.
No, I agree. I agree. 100%.
He's obviously openly frustrated with Dwayne Wade, and he should be. So was LeBron James. LeBron James, how many times did I hear this story that they'd practice during the day? Dwayne Wade would be at practice. And LeBron was under the impression when he got in his car and went home at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and on his way back to the arena, Dwayne Wade was going to play that night. And he'd arrive at the arena, and literally a half hour before the game, Spo would say, hey, Bron, no Dwayne tonight. And LeBron was like, come on, man, what the F? LeBron, you may remember, was playing like 48 minutes, winning games by himself. Dwayne Wade would practice and opt out. Again, this has nothing to do with Dwayne Wade's game. He's one of the 4, 5, 6 greatest two guards in the history of the game. He's a 3-time champion. He's the greatest individual player, I think, including Marino, in Miami sports history. But he's been beat up for years. He doesn't play. He a lot of guys play with a lot of injuries. He doesn't, and obviously Riley's had enough.
And Spo got drug into it because he basically allowed it. I mean, they created an entire terminology, the maintenance program.
Give
they
me
created
a break, right?
They're going to play only a few games a week, no back-to-back
Like Riley
games.
said, Larry Bird's maintenance program was lay down in the corner on his back, and once the timeout was over, get back up and go make a big shot.
I mean, until Dwayne Wade and Spo, I'd never heard of the maintenance program. I've never heard of a guy who can play when he wants, when he doesn't. Never back-to-back games.
Never. And Riley's sick of it. They're paying him a lot of money, obviously. He's one of the greatest players ever. And if this team is going to be very good again, Bosch comes back, great. You got Whiteside. I mean, he did say, Pat Riley, that having Whiteside is almost like getting a lottery pick, which it is. He's a double-double in his sleep. You got Dragic, who's a fine player. Now, Luol Deng has to be more consistent. That's true. But you got the makings of a good basketball team, but Wade's got to be Wade, and he's got to play.
But can Wade be Wade? I mean, can he do that?
Riley seems to think so. Riley didn't say,
I mean,
hey, you know what?
That's a lot of pressure coming from Riley.
Oh, F that pressure.
Well, I mean,
are you kidding me? The guy's making $16 million.
Right, but I'm just saying, when the big man
that ain't
calls
pressure.
you out.
You know what pressure is when you're making $22,000 and you got 4 kids. That's pressure. Dwayne Wade has no idea what pressure is. Everybody calls it, he's got to make a big shot. That's not pressure. Because if he misses that shot, guess what? Every 2 weeks he's getting a paycheck of about $2 million. That ain't pressure. Pressure is the poor bastard out there right now working 12-hour days trying to feed 4 kids. Pressure.
Get on the show.
Call now.
888-640-9385. It's Sid Rosenberg on 640 Sports.
Yesterday morning, FBI agents and Joint Terrorism Task Force officers in Minnesota and California arrested 6 men as part of a 10-month investigation into terror recruitment in Minnesota. All 6 are Minnesotans charged by criminal complaint with conspiring and attempting to provide material support to ISIL. Our offices have dedicated enormous resources during the past year to investigating a large group of friends and relatives who have been meeting with one simple goal in mind. As the complaint makes clear, this group is committed to joining ISIL by any means possible. They are engaged in what we describe as peer-to-peer recruiting, friend to friend, brother to brother. To be clear, we have a terror recruiting problem in Minnesota. And this case demonstrates how difficult it is to put an end to recruiting here. Parents and loved ones should know that there is not one master recruiter organizing in the Somali community locally. What this case shows is that the person radicalizing your son, your brother, your friend may not be a stranger. It may be their best friend right here in town.
Well, I can stand beside ideals I think are right, and I can stand beside the idea to stand and fight. I do believe there's a dream for everyone. This is our country. There's room enough here for science to live, and there's room enough here for religion to forgive and try to understand other people of this land.
This is our country. Minnesota? What the hell's going on there? It's my cousin Norm Coleman.
He's got to keep an eye out around there.
He was just on last week, spent 8 years as the mayor of St. Paul, and he was a senator there. You may remember he won, then he lost Al Franken. He went for the gubernatorial. He beat Hubert Humphrey Jr., but lost to Jesse Ventura. He is Mr. Minnesota, my cousin. He brought the damn Wild, who beat St. Louis back last night, back to, he brought hockey back to Minnesota. Well, and his whole damn state is looking to kill Americans. It's too cold there, that's why.
It's too cold.
It's the weather, I'm telling you.
It's the weather.
Yeah. People down here, they're at the beach, they're under the palm trees. They don't want to kill anybody. Minnesota can't even walk outdoors for 6 months. You remember they found that guy last year? They right about the time James Foley was killed, we started getting more information about this type of stuff. And we killed some guy from America. They found him with like $800 and a passport. He was from Minnesota. And then when they talk about bombing malls all the time, who do they talk about? Not the Town Center Mall in Boca, not the Paramus Mall, Minnesota. What the hell's going on with Minnesota?
I don't know.
They hate the Vikings.
They must.
Well, what are they going to do about it? Should we just get rid of Minnesota as a state, or?
I don't think we can do that.
No. Well, we should get Norm on this week and find out what the hell they're doing in that state that people want to kill us.
It's too cold, like you said. I think they're miserable. They're angry. I don't
The Twins suck. The Timberwolves suck. What's going on there? Anyway, when we talk terrorism, we've done all the other stuff today ad nauseum, right? We've done the Mets with Adam Rubin. We've done the Marlins with Joe Frisaro. We've done the Pat Riley. Riley calling out Dwayne Wade, calling out Eric Spoelstra, calling out LeBron James. We had Mike Breen on. That was great radio, talking about all the NBA playoffs. And we had somebody else on early this morning, too. We had Liz Mandel on, talking about cheating and anal and all that good stuff. She's great. And now it's time to talk about something serious. So we talk about these issues, which we do, politics and news and terrorism. We bring on Max Abrams. We like him. He's great. He's a professor up at Northeastern University in Boston, and he writes for a bunch of different people, and he's a great radio and TV guest, and he's become our terrorism go-to guy. So with that said, good morning, Max. How are you?
Good morning to you. Happy to join you this morning.
Always great to have you on. You do reside in Boston, so before we get to this story and your story about ISIL, yesterday, of course, it commemorated the 2 years since the Boston bombing. The Red Sox beat the Orioles on Patriot Day baseball game. They had the marathon, and I saw on Twitter your picture from your apartment, Max. You're like right there by the finish line. So what was that like yesterday?
I got to give Boston credit. I think that there's a lot of resilience in the city. This is 2 years after the Boston Marathon bombings, and you might think that people there would be very afraid and, talking constantly about terrorism, but I didn't see a whole lot of that. It really just seemed like a normal, important sporting event where people were having a great time and competing. And the only real indicator of what happened a couple of years ago was the high level of security. You could hear helicopters overhead. There were cops everywhere. But they weren't I wouldn't say they were overly intrusive. They weren't patting people down. I think that people probably secretly were being vigilant and looking around and not saying anything. And that's also very helpful for counterterrorism.
Let me ask you about the mind of a terrorist, because I read a bunch of stories yesterday, mostly on your Twitter timeline, where they said Boston showed their resilience. They basically spit in the face of the terrorists. The marathon is still going on, and life in America continues, and we beat them. And I wonder this. Did they feel that way? Tamerlan is dead, obviously, but his brother's alive. People that are still alive that were involved in 9/11, did they share that? Is that American propaganda? In other words, do they feel like, look, no matter what they say in America, we ruined that day. They'll be talking about us every single year moving forward. So, yes, they may still be doing marathons in Boston, but the damage we did is irreparable. Do you think terrorists feel that way?
It's very hard to tell, essentially, what terrorists deem as successful or not, because even sometimes there are some thwarted attacks, and you would think that those are, totally unsuccessful. And then you see in the terrorist group's propaganda promoting the attack. One of the difficulties with counterterrorism is that almost regardless of how governments or societies respond, the terrorists will declare victory.
Yeah, but
the heading of James Foley.
Right, that
ISIS
goes to the
said,
root.
We're going to behead this guy if you don't get out of the Middle East. And so, of course, if we did get out of the Middle East, they would say that's terrific. Alternatively, if we went on the offensive, they would say, look, we've provoked this superpower. That, too, is terrific. And so almost regardless of how you cut it, the terrorists seem to be somewhat pleased.
See, that's my point. They really win because I think realistically, they don't think they're going to cripple our economy right away or keep people from going outside or kill everybody. And you just said it. For example, they find a van in New York City wired with explosives, okay? And the bomb doesn't go off. But what about the fear factor? All these people want to do, really, it's less about how many they kill, what they do. It's the fear factor. Are they making sure that we are eternally fearful? And even during a thwarted attempt, that is the case. So my point is, I understand we need to move on, and part of it is this bravado. We're America, we're bigger, we're tougher. But they do win every single time.
Well, the problem is it's just so darn easy to commit an act of terrorism especially in a liberal democracy if you're not opposed to, hitting soft targets. So, I mean, they're almost always going to be operationally successful on some level unless they're complete idiots.
Good point. Now, tell me about the this recruiting thing. You heard that guy say there that we've got a real problem in Minnesota, but we're also not that far removed, Max, from 3 arrests in Brooklyn, New York. Minnesota seems to be the hotbed, obviously, but there is all over the country. There are folks that are looking to go to Syria, and not just in this country, but abroad. How bad do you think the recruiting problem really is, especially from America to the Middle East?
Well, so far, it really hasn't been that bad from the United States. I think that there is a widespread misunderstanding about how successful Islamic State is with social media. It is true that through Twitter and broadcasting, these graphic images of, beheadings by Jihadi John, that does attract a small number of people. And of course, that's a very salient thing when, jihadis are recruited through violence. However, that's really only one side of the equation. Yes, it can have a recruitment effect among the already radicalized. However, most people, when exposed to this kind of brutality, they're not attracted to the group. They are repulsed by it. And so it's important to look not just at the number of recruits from this graphic imagery, but also the number of people around the world who are now very pissed off at Islamic State and the number of countries who are now participating in the coalition, which continues to grow. And for that reason, the attrition rate, I believe, is outstripping the recruitment rate, largely because of this social media strategy, which is actually backfiring. I mean, the United States only really took the Islamic State threat seriously when Jihadi John beheaded James Foley. The Jordanians only got really involved in the coalition when Islamic State torched their pilot. It was only when the 21 Egyptian Coptics were beheaded in Libya that Egypt also took a firm stance against Islamic State. And so more and more this group has fewer friends, and I think that it's because this social media is simply turning people against the group.
I think that is an amazing statement you make because, first of all, I read your column, Why the Islamic State Actually Stinks at Social Media, on opencanada.org, and you're the only person, Max, to say that. And you use statistical analysis, which never hurts, to prove that before the James Foley video became available to America, that they were actually recruiting more then, that there were people that, I guess they really believed they were fighting for a cause. And like you said, now that they're just, they become, in a lot of people's eyes, complete barbarians, that the numbers are going down. Why do you think, then, that that's not more publicized? Because most mainstream media makes it sound like, oh, every single day they are running out of here. Why are not more people latching on to what you already know?
It kind of reminds me of like a bar fight almost. I mean, somebody might, punch a bigger guy in the face and say that gives him a lot of utility to punch that guy in the face.
Right.
However, it's important to focus on what happens after that. Because the bigger guy, is presumably going to crush the smaller guy. And so far, we've just been focusing on, Islamic State violence and how it can recruit some people. Yes, that's true. But now there's this massive coalition against Islamic State. And the group simply can't win against those kind of numbers. I mean, you take the battle in Tikrit, for example. There were just a few hundred Islamic State fighters holding up that city, and they were surrounded by literally tens of thousands of Shia militia, Iraqi government, U.S. airstrikes. All of that has been mobilized because of this counterproductive social media strategy.
You know what's amazing is, I feel like it was just a couple of weeks ago, maybe it's longer, Max. Here was ISIS on the doorstep of Rome. They're about to take over Italy. They're about to take over the bordering city going into Turkey. They were seemingly moving across the world like you would on a risk board, and that came of risk. And we were talking almost every single day about the inevitability of them coming here, that there was going to be an attack here, if not many attacks. And I don't know, Max. Days go by and months go by. We've got an election coming up, and obviously the Republicans are going to use that in their favor, that Obama fell asleep at the wheel, and now we're in big trouble. But it's just amazing to me, and maybe it's part of our intelligence. Maybe they're doing a better job than we know, but days go by, months go by. They don't seem to be getting any bigger or stronger, ISIL, and nothing's gone on here in America.
Well, I wouldn't declare victory yet.
Okay.
The truth is that I do anticipate attacks at home, even very big attacks. And again, that's just because, yes, it's true. Our law enforcement is doing a fantastic job at breaking up these plots. But I mean, counter-terrorists, we need to be right every time. Terrorists just need to get it right once. And unfortunately, that will happen. It's important to have a nuanced view about Islamic State. It is true that the group is taking a beating in Iraq. I expect it to continue to take a beating because the population has turned so strongly against it. In Syria, by contrast, we really don't have an answer because we don't have ground troops, and that's essential for counterinsurgency. Islamic State is popping up in all sorts of different places, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in the Sinai, in Libya, etc. It's also a big problem in Europe and less so, at least so far, in the United States.
What do you think is the most dangerous group, Max? We hear about ISIL, obviously, Al-Qaeda still going strong. They were responsible for what happened in France not that long ago in Paris. We hear about Boko Haram, a horrible group in Africa. Shabazz doing his thing. I mean, what do you think is the most dangerous group, the most sustainable group, and what group do you think poses the biggest threat to the United States?
Sure. A lot of people make it seem like you have all these different groups that are in competition with each other. There's Nusra, which is the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. There's Islamic State. There's Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen. In reality, I think that we make too much about the boundaries between these groups. Many of these militants, they just want to be with any group. They don't particularly care. It's largely happenstance where they end up. Take Jihadi John. Apparently, he initially wanted to join up with al-Shabaab, but then he got scared because of the drone strikes there had taken out a few of his friends. So instead, he decided to link up with Islamic State. Take the Charlie Hebdo attack and the Paris attack. Those attackers, Koulibaly and Kouachi, they declared allegiance both to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And so I think that the leaders of these groups view the groups as very different from each other, but the actual operatives themselves, less so.
What do you think about this election then coming up, Max? I think it's obviously going to be a huge play. We know immigration's a big deal, obviously, and the economy still remains a big deal. It's improving, but there's some ways to go. But you with the foreign policy has got to be right there, maybe at the very, very top. And even Democrats now, even Obama's own people, not very happy, especially after the deal on the table with Iran. So when you look at the upcoming election and some of the players here on both sides, you have anybody in mind, Max, that you think could actually come to the table with a decent foreign policy, somebody that you think would be a good president in that one respect?
Well, I think that the most interesting foreign policy candidate is Rand Paul. I tend to be not that political. I'm certainly not going to endorse a candidate now. But I do believe that regime change, removing the dictator, both in Iraq and in Libya, was catastrophic from a counterterrorism perspective because it essentially created power vacuums in an otherwise, relatively stable countries that the terrorists now have just absolutely infested. And so Rand Paul can continue to push back and say, well, you guys all supported regime change in Iraq and Libya. And this includes not just the other Republican candidates, but also Hillary Clinton. And so I think he's really going to try to rub her nose in that and say, look, not only did she favor regime change in Iraq like the other Republicans, but she was actually, one of the leading champions for removing Gaddafi as well.
Right. That's no question.
And by similarly, he'll also say, look, we shouldn't remove the Assad regime either because that regime is protecting Damascus from falling in the hands of Islamic State. And so I'm sympathetic to some of Rand Paul's arguments when it comes to counterterrorism, So I'll be curious to hear more about what he has to say about the U.S.-Israeli relationship, which is also going to be a very
Huge.
important issue.
No question. So on the way out, the Middle East really, correct me if I'm wrong here, because you're the expert, I'm not. I dove in here, obviously, and I got an opportunity to speak to really smart people like you, so it helps. But the Middle East is really one big fight between the Sunni and the Shiites, right? So, and one of those groups is obviously a much larger percentage than the other. So when we take out Iraq, for example, and we take out Saddam Hussein, a lot of those Sunnis that were Hussein's people, now they got nowhere to go. And if I'm correct, that has really become predominantly ISIL. And in the end, and at the end of the day, it's still about, but now you got guys that are like, you have regimes that used to be Sunnis, now they're Shiites. So everything seems to be so messed up in the Middle East. So there was clearly classification when it came to those two groups and countries and power. And now that all seems to be pretty confusing, yes?
No doubt. Very, very confusing. Saddam Hussein was Ba'athist, and he was removed and replaced by Shiite,
right.
And then the Sunnis in Iraq became very resentful about essentially being disenfranchised, tricky balance. And the United States is having a tough time, basically negotiating between the Sunnis and the Shia.
Right.
The Shia have the most fighters on the ground in Iraq, but we don't want to use them too much because we risk alienating the more sort of moderate Sunni population, which is essential for turning against Islamic State, which is also Sunni, but of course much, much more radical.
Right.
And so it's a very careful balance that we're struggling with.
And in the end here, what ISIS does is exactly what Saddam did. I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Saddam Hussein, he did have his people behead folks and cut their hands off and cut their limbs off. The only difference I've been told between ISIL and Saddam is that these people put it on video. Otherwise, they really have the same tact.
That's true, but I think that there's another difference. I'm American, so I'm constantly asking myself, which enemy, in a sense, is more tolerable from a U.S. national security perspective. A lot of these actors in the Middle East, they're totally immoral. They have no problems killing civilians, but the question I always ask myself is, do they pose a threat to American civilians? And so that really dictates which party I support. The Shia militia in Iraq, for example, they do some horrible things to the local population. They torch areas and engage in some killings, but they're not threatening the United States in the same way as Islamic State. And so I think that's also an important consideration to take into account.
You're great. You really are. Your column, Why the Islamic State Actually Stinks at Social Media, which folks can find right now on opencanada.org, is great. It's the only column I've seen that really provides statistical support that, in fact, while recruitment numbers may still be a bit scary, that the use of Twitter for ISIL may be backfiring on them. So I love the article. I love when you come on, and please keep coming back, Max. Excellent job. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon, buddy.
Take care. What a great job. Max Abrams, and there's a lot of kids up at Northeastern University up in Boston that are very, very lucky because he is their professor. 888-640-9385. We'll come right back right after this.